Washington Commanders fans, buckle up, because day 9 of training camp just delivered one of the most emotionally chaotic afternoons of the entire summer, and somehow the most alarming headlines had almost nothing to do with what actually happened on the football field. We are talking about two starting caliber players walking off in the middle of practice within minutes of each other. We are talking about a third player announcing his retirement, adding to a growing list that already had fans nervously counting on their fingers. We are talking about 3 brand new offensive linemen signed on the same day those injuries happened, which either means absolutely nothing or means everything, depending on who you ask. And in the middle of all that chaos, Stefon Diggs quietly strapped on the pads for the second consecutive day and started making the kind of plays that remind everyone exactly why this front office went out and got him in the first place. Let us walk through every single piece of this genuinely wild Saturday at Bank of America Performance Center, because there is a lot to unpack and every single storyline matters heading into the most important stretch of the preseason calendar. Start with the setting, because context matters here. It was Kids' Day at the facility, the sun was blazing, the humidity was thick enough to chew, and the Washington Commanders were back in full pads for day 9 of training camp. It got hot enough, and the players were working hard enough that the team had to call a full team hydration break in the middle of practice just to keep everyone upright and functioning. That detail alone tells you something important about how this training camp is being run under Dan Quinn this year. Last summer's version of camp had a considerably more relaxed feel to it. This year, they are getting after it. Pads are cracking, tempo is high, and the coaching staff is clearly determined to build a football team that is battle-tested before the lights come on for real in September. That is exactly the kind of camp fans should want to see from a team with legitimate expectations heading into this season. Even if the increased physicality comes with an increased injury report to match. And increased injury report is exactly what fans got today, because before practice had even wrapped, the biggest story coming out of the building was not about big plays. It was about who was walking off the field. Left tackle Laremy Tunsil, the anchor of this entire offensive line and a player making roughly $30 million a year to protect Jaden Daniels' blind side, left practice today holding his arm after a one-on-one pass rush rep against Deatrick Wise Jr. The training staff checked on him immediately, walked him back to the medical tent, and from there he was escorted into the facility entirely. The initial hypothesis floating around from national reporters was that this looked like a stinger, which for anyone who has ever played football at any level is a genuinely unpleasant but usually short-term injury. A stinger is essentially a nerve impingement that runs from the neck down through the arm, producing a sharp burning sensation that can leave a limb feeling weak or partially numb for anywhere from a few minutes to a few days. It is common. It is frequently not serious, but it is also the kind of injury that can occasionally linger far longer than anyone expects. And Commanders fans do not need to be reminded of just how brutal last season's injury luck was for this football team. That is precisely why the appropriate level of concern here has to be measured rather than dismissed outright, until Dan Quinn or a team doctor actually stands in front of a podium and confirms exactly what is going on with Tunsil. Speculation from outside reporters saying probably just a stinger does not fully settle anybody's nerves. This is the best offensive lineman on the entire roster. This is the player the front office committed $30 million a year to specifically because they needed stability and dominance at the most important non-quarterback position on the field. Watching him walk off holding his arm, even for what is likely a short-term issue, is the kind of moment that makes an entire fan base collectively hold its breath until the next official update arrives. And as if one starter leaving practice was not enough drama for a single afternoon, cornerback Trey Amos left practice as well for reasons that remain genuinely unclear as of right now. This one carries its own specific and separate layer of concern because Amos had only just returned to practice after missing the entire spring, the early portion of summer camp. and the first week of training camp entirely. He suited up in full pads, participated fully in team drills, ran with the ones, and looked like he was finally putting that absence behind him. And then, on just his second day back, he heads back toward the facility again. Nobody covering the team on site was able to definitively say whether this was a planned veteran rest period, a minor tweak, or something more serious. The uncertainty itself is what makes this one sting a little more than the Tunsil situation, because Amos is projected as one of the starting outside cornerbacks for this defense, and every single practice rep he misses is a rep he does not get before the games start counting. The honest and fair read on both situations requires resisting the urge to spiral into full panic mode while also refusing to pretend these are nothing at all. Football is a genuinely violent, collision-based sport, and any team running a physical training camp with pads on is going to produce injury scares along the way. The players involved in these specific collisions were not doing anything malicious or reckless. This is simply what competitive practice reps look like when two professional athletes are trying to win their individual battle against each other at full speed. What matters now is patience. Monday is the next opportunity for Dan Quinn to address the media directly. Since the team has a scheduled day off tomorrow, and until that press conference happens, everything remains speculation rather than confirmed medical information. Now, layer on top of all of that the retirement news, because today added a third name to a list that started with defensive lineman DJ Davidson officially calling it a career before practice even began, joining what is now becoming a genuinely notable trend during this specific training camp. Davidson's retirement carries its own emotional weight given that just last week his significant other was spotted at practice wearing his jersey with his name across the back. The kind of small human detail that makes these roster transactions feel less like footnotes and more like real people making real-life decisions. Whatever led to this decision, the hope from everyone following this team closely is simply that Davidson and every other player who has stepped away this camp are doing well physically, mentally, and emotionally as they move into whatever comes next in their lives. Alongside the retirement news, the roster continued churning in other directions too. Undrafted rookie defensive lineman out of LSU and guard Timothy McKay, a priority undrafted free agent signing from a previous offseason, were both released from the roster today. Neither of those moves was expected to significantly shape the outcome of this season, but roster churn during training camp is a constant, and every single spot matters when a coaching staff is trying to build the best possible 90-man group before the cuts to 53 begin in earnest. And then, almost immediately connected to the injury scares along the offensive line, the front office turned around and signed 3 new offensive linemen on the exact same day. Guard Max Sharping, center Daniel Brunskill, and tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere all joined the roster. And while none of these 3 names are walking into this building to compete for major starting roles, the timing is impossible to fully ignore. Dan Quinn himself specifically framed these additions as competition depth rather than direct injury replacements, tied to the team wrapping up a 2-day training block and wanting more bodies available to push the existing depth chart. That explanation is entirely plausible on its own. But when you signed 3 offensive linemen on the exact same day, your starting left tackle left practice holding his arm, and your starting center situation remains something the team is continuing to monitor and assess, it is fair for observers to wonder whether there was at least some connective tissue between those decisions, even if the front office is not saying so publicly. Either way, adding competition to a room that already has real questions behind the starters is never a bad organizational instinct, especially for a team that has felt the pain of insufficient offensive line depth in recent memory. Now let us actually get into the football, because despite all of the injury drama dominating the headlines, there was a genuinely excellent day of practice happening simultaneously, and burying that under the anxiety of the injury report would do a disservice to what this team is actually building. Stefon Diggs, freshly signed and now in his second consecutive day wearing full pads, continued proving exactly why bringing him into this building was such a significant move for this offense. What stood out immediately is that Diggs is already fully integrated into team drills, running full 11 on 11 reps just days after signing, which reflects the kind of year-round conditioning and professional preparation that has defined his career. Dan Quinn's process is well documented at this point. Nobody gets ushered directly into a starting role without earning it. Not rookies, and apparently not accomplished veterans either, which is why Diggs found himself taking some reps with the second-team offense, catching passes from backup quarterback Marcus Mariota during this specific ramp-up phase, even as everyone in the building understands exactly where he is ultimately going to line up once the regular season begins. And when Diggs did get his opportunities with the starters, he made them count. According to reporters on the ground, he produced at least 3 notable plays during team drills today. One came on a deep curl route where he sat down perfectly in a soft spot of the defensive zone and picked up significant yardage, reportedly working against cornerback Mike Sainristil on that specific rep. Another came on a crisp out route where he showed the quick release and the sharp cutting ability that has defined his entire career, plucking the ball cleanly out of the air and getting upfield immediately after the catch. For a player who signed with this team only recently, showing up and immediately making winning plays against a competitive starting defense is exactly the kind of signal that gets an entire fan base and coaching staff excited about what the rest of this season could look like. The ripple effect of Diggs' arrival is already visible in how it is shaping the development of the players around him, and nowhere is that more obvious than with second-year receiver Antonio Williams. Watching Williams operate in practice, the specific suddenness of his release off the line, the way he breaks down defensive backs in his stems, has fans and reporters alike drawing direct comparisons to Diggs himself, with some already nicknaming him a younger mirror image of what Diggs represents at his best. Having Diggs and established veteran Terry McLaurin in the same receiver room to mentor Williams as he continues developing is exactly the kind of situation that accelerates a young player's growth curve. And it also means Williams is not being rushed prematurely into a larger role than his actual readiness warrants. He gets to develop with genuine patience and genuine structure around him, which historically produces more sustainable long-term outcomes than throwing a young receiver into the fire before he is fully prepared. The kicker competition also produced genuinely significant developments today that deserve real attention heading toward roster cutdowns. Drew Stevens continued absolutely stamping his case for winning this job outright, connecting on kicks from 53 and 55 yards over the past 2 practices, drilling everything he has attempted right down the middle of the uprights with the kind of leg strength that made this front office prioritize outbidding other teams to bring him in after the draft. Meanwhile, incumbent kicker Jake Moody continued struggling, missing a 33-yard attempt and a 47-yard attempt today alone, bringing his total missed kicks over the past several practices to somewhere around 5 or 6. The temptation from parts of the fan base is to simply cut Moody immediately and hand the job outright to Stevens, given how dramatically the practice performance has diverged between the two, but the more prudent organizational approach is maintaining genuine competition through the preseason games themselves. Given this franchise's historically cursed relationship with the kicker position specifically, nobody wants to prematurely crown a winner only to watch him struggle once real preseason game pressure enters the equation. Stevens looks like he has this job locked up based on pure practice evidence, but the preseason games themselves will provide the final and most important confirmation. The defensive side of the ball had itself a genuinely outstanding day as well, with defensive lineman Deatrick Wise Jr., earning informal MVP of practice recognition from multiple reporters on the ground, continuing an edge rush partnership alongside teammates that has been producing consistently disruptive results throughout this entire training camp. Linebacker production was equally notable, with one particular defender flashing serious speed and instincts in run support, reportedly forcing a fumble during today's session and continuing to show the kind of closing burst that makes defenders must watch during every practice period. Safety depth also continued developing in encouraging fashion, with rotational reps increasing for younger players as the coaching staff works to identify exactly who deserves expanded roles as the season approaches. Cornerback Rasul Douglas put together arguably his best day of the entire camp, coming away with back-to-back near interceptions against backup quarterback Marcus Mariota, getting a hand directly on one pass to knock it away and missing another potential pick by what reporters described as a matter of millimeters before the ball was completed elsewhere. Douglas continuing to play at this level throughout camp reinforces exactly why he remains one of the more trusted and reliable pieces of this secondary heading into the season. Interior defensive line development also generated real excitement, with a specific young defender earning multiple individual run stuff recognitions today, adding his name to the growing list of players that fans and reporters want to see given significant preseason snaps once the actual games begin. That broader theme, wanting to see the full breadth of this roster's talent tested against outside competition rather than simply within the friendly confines of intra-squad practice reps, is becoming one of the defining storylines heading into next week specifically. On offense, the fullback position continued generating genuine praise as well, with the current fullback opening up real running lanes in the ground game today, springing a running back loose for a substantial gain on at least one notable play. That specific kind of downhill physical fullback usage has been a consistent theme throughout this camp, and it reflects exactly the kind of complete offensive philosophy this coaching staff appears to be building around Jayden Daniels heading into his sophomore campaign. Speaking of the broader offensive picture, reporters also noted a specific bootleg concept today that left Daniels with an enormous amount of open field in front of him, the kind of naked boot action that has quietly tortured defenses in this division for literal decades, regardless of which specific quarterback has been running it. The threat of that concept, combined with the genuine depth and talent now present across this receiving core, suggests defenses are going to have serious trouble accounting for every single element of what this offense can present. Now, because no genuinely eventful training camp day would be complete without some completely unnecessary but thoroughly entertaining off-field drama, Stefon Diggs also managed to stir up the fan base with a jersey number request that has already generated its own separate news cycle. Diggs is currently wearing number 18 at practice, but he made it known through social media that his actual preference would be to wear the number 7 previously worn by franchise legend Joe Theismann. The reaction from certain corners of this fan base was immediate and predictably intense, given how deeply Theismann's legacy is woven into this franchise's history, including an MVP season and the franchise's first Super Bowl championship. There is a legitimate and reasonable argument against Diggs wearing that number, specifically because the organization appears to be moving methodically through a plan to retire the jersey numbers of its most significant legends one at a time, having already honored Darrell Green and Art Monk in recent years, with John Riggins reportedly next in line. If Theismann's number is genuinely on a path toward retirement in the near future, that represents a completely fair and understandable reason for him to decline handing it over to anyone, Diggs included. What deserves pushback, however, is the segment of the fan base reaching for tired and frankly unfair comparisons to previous quarterback jersey number situations that ended in genuine tragedy, drawing connections that simply do not hold up when comparing a rookie quarterback with an unproven career trajectory to a receiver with a legitimate Hall of Fame caliber URSM who is closing in on career milestones that very few players at his position ever reach. Those comparisons deserve to be retired themselves, regardless of how this specific jersey number situation ultimately resolves. Away from the jersey drama, one moment from today's Kids' Day festivities deserves a considerably more serious and sympathetic mention. A fan reported that a young family member was trampled in a crowd control situation at the kids' zone while waiting for autograph signings, allegedly due to inadequate staff oversight of what became an unsafe crowd environment. That is a genuinely serious concern that deserves direct organizational accountability rather than being treated as a minor footnote, and any fan experiencing something similar should absolutely document it and reach out to the team directly to ensure it gets addressed appropriately going forward. Safety at these fan-facing events matters enormously, especially when children are involved. Looking ahead, next week represents the single most important stretch of this entire training camp cycle so far, because Washington gets its first true external evaluation when the Miami Dolphins arrive in town for joint practices ahead of the preseason opener. Every single storyline discussed today, the health of Tunsil and Amos, the development of Antonio Williams and the rest of this young receiver room, the trajectory of the kicker competition, the readiness of this secondary against outside competition, gets its first genuine stress test against a team that has not been running the exact same install and the exact same daily reps for the past several weeks. That is precisely when the real answers about this roster's actual readiness heading into the regular season are going to start emerging, rather than continued speculation based purely on how players look against their own teammates day after day. This has been an emotionally exhausting but genuinely fascinating stretch of training camp. And the truth is that both things can be accurate simultaneously. The injury concerns are real and deserve continued monitoring rather than dismissal. The retirement trend deserves genuine human sympathy for every player choosing to walk away from this brutal sport on their own terms. And the on-field product, from Stefon Diggs already making winning plays to Antonio Williams looking like a legitimate future star in the making to a defense that continues developing real playmakers up and down the roster, gives this fan base every legitimate reason to feel genuinely excited about where this football team is heading as the calendar turns towards September. If you have been riding with this Washington Commanders coverage all camp long, now is exactly the moment to lock in for what comes next. Drop your honest concern level for both Laramie Tunsil and Trey Amos in the comments right now. Tell us whether you think Stefon Diggs actually gets that number 7 jersey before it eventually gets retired. And let us know which player on this roster you are most excited to watch once the Dolphins come to town for joint practices next week. Smash that like button, drop a comment with your honest thoughts on everything we covered today, and make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss a single update as this Washington Commanders training camp story continues to unfold. We will be back with more the moment new information comes out. Hail to the Washington Commanders!